Imagine if you could dance confidently in front of people with no choreography. If you could feel truly free and expressive in your movement. And if you had no problem coming up with variations and new moves. What if I told you you could do that and all you had to do was change the way you learn? Let me explain. I'm Mimi and I'm a professional pole dancer that has been in this business for over 10 years. I started pole dancing as an adult with no dance, sports, or movement background. And I used to hate freestyle dancing. I was so uncomfortable freestyling that I'd make excuses to leave class early so I wouldn't have to dance at the end. And I was uncomfortable because, honestly, dancing in front of people is scary. I also didn't feel like I knew enough dance moves to dance to a whole song. And then my mind would just go completely blank every time I got up to dance. I remember I would sit in my car before class memorizing moves on Instagram and YouTube to do in the freestyle portion of class. Okay, all that is now so far in the distant past. Today, freestyle is my bread and butter and I never have trouble being creative. And all I did was change the way I learn. In this video, I'm going to share how I leveled up my freestyle and how you can too. If you're here, you probably have trouble stringing together more than 2 moves, or you're just generally uncomfortable with freestyle and have trouble being creative. So let me ask you this. What kind of classes do you take? I ask this because most dancers that have these problems are generally the kind that take choreo classes or classes with a lot of structure. They learn how to do things step by step and always have someone there to tell them what to do. Be honest, does this sound like you? So this is called linear learning. And it's called linear learning because you learn exactly the path to get somewhere. People love linear learning. It's a super popular form of education, especially in dance, because it makes people feel safe and comfortable. Students don't need to worry about if they're doing something right or wrong because someone who knows way more than them is telling them what to do. When people tell you what to do, you won't feel like you run the risk of being confused or embarrassed because that liability is now on the person telling you what to do and not on yourself. So you'll never be that weird outlier because everyone is basically doing the same thing the same way. So obviously, safety and comfort are important for people to feel. But linear learning is also popular because you can see progress and results fairly quickly. This makes it easier to set goals and then work towards them. So we know students love linear learning, but what about teachers? I gotta say, teachers often love this traditional way of teaching because it gives them a sense of authority and then it makes them feel good. I know this firsthand because I used to be one of those teachers. It's also really gratifying to be the role model that students look up to and aspire to be. I'm sure if you're a teacher, you've heard students say things like, "I want to dance just like you." Linear learning is great for introducing people to new scary things because it gives structure and a sense of safety. But the problem with it is that it causes people to get lost in places where there are no structure. For example, freestyle or when you're trying to be creative. So here's how to fix it. Introducing nonlinear learning. Nonlinear learning is where we are given concepts instead of formulas. It's an approach that doesn't follow a rigid, predetermined path and instead emphasizes flexibility, exploration, and student autonomy. Okay. Nonlinear learning is obviously not as popular because it puts people in a vulnerable place. Students have to explore and make their own choices, which can be scary, especially when they're exploring new topics they aren't familiar with. Unstructured environments also leave a lot of room for people to stand out, and most people are not willing to stand out, especially when they might be categorized as being different. Everyone has their own unique way of doing things, and that's encouraged in nonlinear learning. I love this because it shows people that there is no right or wrong way to do things. My beef with traditional linear learning is that it can box people in, making them feel like there's only one way to do things. Like imagine doing something beautiful, but thinking it's wrong because it's different from what everyone else is doing. I see a lot of people diminishing their creativity and their light because they are scared of making mistakes. Another thing about nonlinear learning is that progress isn't always clear-cut. In linear learning, you're on a straight path from A to B, so you can easily see how far you've come. But in nonlinear learning, it's more like exploring a web of ideas. You might jump around, revisit things, and make connections that aren't obvious at first. can feel a bit messy, but that's where the magic happens. Honestly, there aren't that many teachers who do nonlinear teaching, and I think it's because it takes a lot of humility. As a teacher, you have to let go of the idea that you're the expert with all the answers. It's about empowering your students to find their own path and become their own inspiration. You're not the aspirational goal anymore, you're just there to guide and support them. But the payoff for nonlinear learning is huge. You end up understanding things on a much deeper level because you're actively building your own knowledge through exploration and discovery. It engages so much more of your body and mind than just being told what to do and then copying that. Think of it this way. Linear learning is like memorizing how to solve a specific math problem. You can ace that problem, but then get stumped when it's presented a little differently. Nonlinear learning, on the other hand, is like understanding the core principles of math. So you can tackle all sorts of problems and even come up with your own equations. In dance, it's the same idea. When you're taught a move and told exactly how to do it to make it look good, you might nail that one way of doing it, but you also start to believe that's the only way. That's where your creativity gets stifled. You miss out on all the other cool variations and possibilities because you're stuck in that one mold. Want to try nonlinear learning? I've put together a master program that teaches you 4 key movement concepts to completely transform your pole dancing. No more just copying moves. You'll actually understand what your body is doing and why. I've seen people make insane progress with this program because it gives them the fundamental movement principles that underpin everything in pole dancing. Think of it like building a house. The stronger the foundation, the higher you can go. All the details are linked below. And if you stick around to the end of this video, I've got a special discount code for you to use on the program. So now that we understand linear and non-linear learning, you can start to see why you might struggle with freestyle. If you're used to being told exactly what to do, you'll freeze up in situations where you're suddenly on your own with no instructions. But here's the thing, when you really understand a move, you don't need to memorize every tiny detail. You get the concept, and that opens up a whole world of possibilities. You can literally freestyle to a whole song just playing around with that one move, finding all sorts of cool variations and transitions. Okay, if you don't believe me, check out the video I linked below. I'll show you how I take just one combo and create a whole freestyle routine around it for not 1, but 2 songs. Linear learning is like following a straight road to a single destination. It works, but it's limiting. Nonlinear learning is like knowing how to navigate a network of roads. You can get to a million different destinations from anywhere. Okay, so don't get me wrong, choreo classes are awesome. They're a fantastic way to improve your musicality, and honestly, they're often the easiest way to learn pole dancing, especially when you're just starting out. But remember, most choreo classes are all about mimicking the teacher's moves and their interpretation of the music. It's not your movement or your musicality. If you only do linear learning, or you do too much of it, you'll get really good at copying. But you might struggle to come up with your own ideas. You'll always feel like you need to remember what you learned instead of just feeling the music and letting your body flow. And that can make it harder to connect with your own unique style and express yourself authentically. Okay, look, I get it. Nonlinear learning isn't easy to get into. It's not just about finding the right resources. It can be genuinely uncomfortable for a lot of people. You have to be willing to explore, get curious, and think for yourself. It's tough to break away from that "what am I supposed to do" mindset, especially if you're used to linear learning. At first, you're probably going to be wondering if you're even doing it right all of the time. When I first started with nonlinear learning, I was constantly second-guessing myself, feeling like I was just wasting time, and it wasn't until I started seeing a different kind of progress, the kind you don't get with linear learning, that I really bought into it. In nonlinear learning, you don't get that instant gratification that you get with linear learning. There's not always something tangible to show for your effort, so you miss out on that dopamine hit that you could get from linear learning. But trust the process. Think about it. Linear learning is literally a straight line, while nonlinear learning is really just a messy scribble. It's obvious which one sparks more creativity. Okay, so if you feel like you're stuck in a rut, doing the same moves over and over again, it's probably because you don't really get the movement. You're just repeating what you were taught, and it's hard to build on that. But when you understand the concepts behind the moves, you can play with them, change them up, and make them your own. Repetition isn't really repetition anymore. It's more like exploring different flavors of the same idea. So remember, freestyle is not about showing off every move you know. If you see freestyle as just a highlight reel, that's a sign of linear learning. With nonlinear learning, exploration is key. It's made freestyle so much easier for me, so much so that it just becomes a natural part of how you learn. Linear learning tells us there is something to recall. Nonlinear learning tells us there is something to create. And you can quote me on that. Now let's be real. Nonlinear learning isn't for everyone. If you're happy following a blueprint and you don't want to be the blueprint, then you can ignore most of what I just said. Most people just want to get good at something fast, and choreo and traditional linear learning are great for that. But if you're that 1% who wants to go deeper, then stick around because this channel is for you. As promised, here's the discount code you can use for my online program, Movement Mastery. If you have any questions about breaking into freestyle or taking your practice to the next level, drop them in the comments below and I'll respond. If you liked this topic, then definitely check out this video next and make sure you grab that free sexy movement lesson here. See y'all next week.